Now, a landmark new report from drug policy think tank Volteface has revealed failures in the provision of cannabis-based medicines in the UK, leaving people with chronic illnesses no choice but to risk criminalisation by using drug dealers instead of doctors.
Well, we're now delighted to be joined in the studio by the woman behind the report, Katya Kowalski, as well as the physician and epidemiologist, Dr. Steve Hadjioff. Welcome to you both. So, it sounds quite alarming. I don't know who to go to first. Katya, I'll go to you first. So, is this genuinely true? How many people now are going to a drug dealer rather than to a doctor?
Well, I think just to kind of lay the landscape of what medical cannabis looks like to date in the UK, medical cannabis was legalised 4 years ago in the UK, but since then we haven't seen a massive uptake of prescribing amongst clinicians. Less than 1% of doctors that could prescribe cannabis are doing so currently, and we've got about 20,000 patients that are prescribed legally, whereas about 1.8 million people that are self-medicating illicitly on the market. On the illegal market, that is. And what this report's really looked at is trying to understand what the limitations are to medical cannabis prescribing currently, why doctors don't feel comfortable prescribing confidently, and what we can do to make cannabis, be more mainstream and seen as a legitimate medicine.
But if they're the doctor and they know their patient and they've decided not to do it, maybe there is a reason, a medical reason not to do it, because you're very much of the stance you'd like cannabis legalised full stop. So you're coming from that angle. This is the bespoke doctor for this patient.
Well, I think what we've seen is the way in which cannabis was legalised medically in the first place. It was legalised through a sensationalist media campaign that was extremely effective and successful in changing the legislation. But I think the way in which it was legalised in the first place made doctors quite sceptical, and it's quite an uncommon way to see a medicine legalised and rescheduled. And I think up until this point now, the last 4 years, we've the industry and the sector has been trying to educate doctors to feel more comfortable and understand the benefits of medical cannabis.
Steve, you wrote the foreword to this report. I mean, do you think that some doctors feel a stigma in terms of prescribing cannabis, that they feel there might be some kind of backlash if they were to do so because it can be seen as controversial?
Look, I think there is a role for stigma, but I think there are broader issues there. Doctors are used to prescribing what they know is the best for that patient, what they know is safe for that patient, and what is the most appropriate in that instance for that condition that the patient's suffering from. And we don't have that data yet. For cannabis, and what the doctors who were interviewed in this report have said quite clearly is that it doesn't matter whether we're dealing with a compound that comes from a cannabis plant or from a chemical plant. It needs to be tested in the same way. We need to prove safety. We need to know that it works, who it works for best, and who it doesn't work for. And then it's just like any other medicine.
But would you be happy to prescribe cannabis?
Would I prescribe, cannabis flower to be smoked? Personally, no.
And why is that? Because that sort of goes to Katya's point. Do you need, to understand it a little bit more? Are you just waiting for the facts to come forward? What makes you a little bit reluctant to?
No, look, I think maybe if it was in a really, really extreme case where someone had nothing else to turn to, then I might. Or if it was one of these oils for one of these children with this horrible intractable epilepsy, then of course I would. But what I'm interested in is how we get every doctor comfortable with prescribing medicines. And we're used to prescribing medicines where there's one thing in it, and we know what it does, we know it's been proved to be safe, we know it's been proved to be effective, and that's when I'll be happy, is when the majority of doctors are happy.
Katya, I just wondered, is maybe one of the issues is that maybe doctors also agree, or some of them agree, that cannabis can be a drug that leads people as a gateway to harder drugs, and therefore don't want to set them down that path.
Yeah, well, I think, like many other medicines, cannabis is very similar to other medicines in that lots of drugs that are prescribed can have, risk and potential of abuse. But, when you look at the evidence, and in the report, many doctors, especially pain specialists, felt more comfortable prescribing cannabis than, say, opioids, and saw cannabis as a potential means of harm reduction.
Did you think we'd be further down the line, the fact that it was sort of legalised, that you could prescribe it 4 years ago? Are you surprised how slow it's been with the uptake with doctors?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everyone, when they saw, especially advocates in 2018 when it was legalized, expected that, you know, within a few years we'd have hundreds of thousands of patients, but that just hasn't been the case. And I think, you know, what this report's trying to do is that in order to be patient-focused, we need to be clinician-focused, and we need to, you know, listen to clinicians, understand their concerns and limitations, and take those head on and tackle them so that we can see prescribing when appropriate.
Steve, Lorraine, one of our viewers, has emailed in to say medicinal cannabis is in synthetic form, so not even as effective as cannabis for medical use, rather than recreational use. She doesn't think it's a gateway drug, but is Lorraine right about that? That it's the medicinal cannabis is not as effective as ordinary cannabis for medical use?
I think that's a really, really interesting question, and it's a complicated one to answer, because there is evidence around medicinal cannabis. I'm not saying that there haven't been trials conducted, and some of the trials have shown that wider plants or whole plant extracts work better than just isolating a specific compound. But we need to understand why that is. There's a number of potential reasons for that, and actually that's another area of research. We don't want to be in a baby and bathwater situation. We do have evidence. We do have trials that show that some cannabis products in some indications are really effective, and we should encourage prescribing where appropriate in those areas. But we desperately need to do the research and get it right.
Absolutely do. And certainly what we don't want is people thinking they should have got cannabis when they didn't, and then going to a drug dealer to try and get it. That would absolutely serve nobody's purpose whatsoever. And that was a good comment there by one of our viewers. So thank you very much indeed there, Dr. Steve Hagioff. Thank you very much. And Katya Kowalski, thank you very much indeed. Now,